Norwalk pioneers from centuries past help us understand our roots as we preserve their memories today. Darius David Johnston, one of the city's founders, came to California from Ohio looking for opportunity with his wife. Fortunately for Norwalk, Johnston's ambitions led him to create Norwalk's first school system in 1880, and by providing financial backing, the first true industry in town, a cheese factory. D.D. Johnston also was running a working farm, providing a place to purchase food for the local community. His home, a museum now, is situated on what was once his sprawling ranch. Welcome to the Hargitt House Museum for a highlight in history. Now, a quick background as to why we're here. The home is on the National Registry of Historic Homes and was built in 1891. The home's namesake, D.D. Johnston, was one of the pioneer families in Norwalk. He and his wife, Adelpha DeWitt, they married in 1865 and settled in California in 1876. 15 years later, they built this home at a cost of $2,800, and this included 167 acres of land at the time. Now it's time to go inside and see what life was like for an affluent family and the founding members of Norwalk. Come with me on a special insider tour. This wonderful home, we have the heart of the home. We have Pat Martin here, who's a docent, and you know everything about this home there is to tell us.
I know quite a bit about it, yes. In fact, we have a lot of really special items in this house. For instance, our table, it is older than the actual house is. They brought it with them from Ohio when they came here. And it has 6 leaves. They're 10.5 inches wide, so they can set 18 people very comfortably here with the table. And the table has an extra leg. It's a 5-legged table, so that when they pull it out, it doesn't fold in the middle. Dishes that are on the table were left here. They are from the house. The rest of them have all been donated. This was donated in honor of one of our docents that was here for many, many years.
Now, is this see-through cabinetry, is that something that was common back in the day? Is that what a lot of homes had, or was it more unique? Because I haven't seen this myself before.
Oh, really?
I haven't.
No. I believe that it was something more common back then than it is now, yes.
Now we've moved over to the china cabinet, and I think this china cabinet is really special. There's a few things in here that I've never seen before, and we're going to get Pat to explain some of it.
In here we have the hot chocolate pot, and it's rather old. They served hot chocolate in early afternoon or in sometimes instead of the tea. As you can see, it's a beautiful set.
We also have on top of the cabinet something that was discovered in a completely different area.
It looks pewter, but it's really silver. But we don't clean it because it would just turn back like it is. And it's a tea set. All of this was found out in the pump house. And they brought it in and cleaned it all out.
Continuing our home tour, here's the hub where all the meals were prepared for D.D. Johnston, his wife, and 2 daughters, Cora and Edith. In addition to family meals, they also fed their ranch hands.
Welcome to the kitchen.
And what draws my attention is this wood-burning stove. It's just so quaint and so reminiscent of the time back then and what things used to be like. And it was a lot harder back then, wasn't it, for women?
Yes, it was, because it is a wood-burning stove. They do have the ovens, and this is where they can clean the stove out, and they can put the wood in there to burn. And we have the oven here. Oh. And it takes a strong lady to use the stove. Believe me, it does. We have the irons, which are so heavy. I don't see how a lady would iron, but she always had 2 and sometimes 3. She always had them left on the stove to keep them hot. She would use one and iron, and when it got cooled, then she'd put it back on the stove and she'd take the next one.
Now, here at this table, these are all gadgets and different devices to make your job easier in the kitchen. But today, a lot of our devices have electrical cords. None of these have electrical cords.
No, they
it's
sure
all
don't.
it's all handwork that you have to do, but it does make life easier for them. At least it did back then, right?
And have you any idea what this is?
No, to me it looks like it's a mold for bread, but it's not.
It's a mold for butter. And you just make it shape it with your hands, and then you just put it in there to mold it into a pound of butter.
Now, when they want to get fancy with the butter, I think that this might help them with that. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Can you explain this a little bit?
Sure. Inside here we have a pineapple design. And you just make the little pat of butter and put it in there. And the actual pineapple design, I was told, was a sign of wealth and also welcoming.
We're not going to go over every device, but there are some really interesting ones that people might not know about, like this one.
It's a pickle spear. Take the lid off of your pickles, and that's what it's for.
What's this
They
one?
were very frugal. This is, as you see, there are pieces of soap in here. And when they would get down to a little sliver of soap, they would save it all. And when it was time to do dishes, you would fill your sink with water and you would get your suds. Can you tell me what this is?
I can cheat. I've seen it before, so you tell us.
It's where they made their candles. The actual electricity didn't come here until 1912. And up until that time, they had gas lights. And even after that, they kept the gas because they never knew when the electricity was going to go out.
From lighting things up to cooling things down.
And here we have the old-fashioned ice box. If they needed ice, it went in here to keep this is all metal, and it helps keep the rest of the ice box cold. And if she needed ice, this was put in the window because the ice wagon came by, pulled by horses, and if she needed 25 pounds, it went this way. And a little story that I found upstairs in the bedroom was the telephone company wanted to put a line across the back of the property. And Mr. Johnson wasn't too enthused about it, but I guess the girls kind of talked him into it. And he said, okay, but I'm going to get free telephone. You put your line across there, but I'm not paying for the telephone. I'm going to get a free telephone. So that's why the telephone line went across the back of his property.
Another way they connected was by socializing. So we leave the kitchen to learn more about other rooms in this historic home, like the parlor. So this room is more formal, and they use this on a regular basis, or did they not?
The ladies did. The men would go out with their cigars and have their talks and smokes, but the ladies would have their tea in here.
And this was also a room for some entertainment here, I see, too.
Uh-huh. Yes.
That was their TV back then, right?
That's right.
And what are we calling?
This is a Victrola from 1912, I believe it is. Yes. And we have quite a lot of the records, which are really strange to the kids this day. The kids that come in from schools are amazed at the size and the weight of them.
So they had the records. That was one part of their entertainment. But then they had a whole bookcase here, too, if they wanted to do some reading in this room.
Yes, they have a lot of books in this house. Yes. Of course, you know, 2 of them were school teachers. So Cora was a school teacher and her husband was a school teacher.
Now, Cora is the daughter of
Yes.
Dee Dee Johnston, and then her husband
was Charles Hargitt. That's why it's Johnston Hargitt House, because the Johnstons built it, but the Hargitts lived here the longest.
And Cora and Charles, they also had a son here in this home.
Yes, and he was also Charles, but they called him Chung, unbeknownst to most of us.
And he's the one that actually carried on the tradition. He was the third generation who lived in
Yes.
here.
In fact, he was born in this house, and he was here until they moved him out. When he was ill, they moved him out to the hospital, Studebaker Hospital, in fact.
Shortly after Chun Hargitt passed in 1975, his wife Ida decided she could no longer look after the home. In Chun's will, he designated the home be donated to the city of Norwalk as a museum at Ida's discretion. Understanding future generations had much to learn from his family's rich history, although there are parts of the home that still remain a mystery. Okay, so now we're in a room that has something called a square grand piano, and we have an organ, I understand, from a long time ago.
Yes.
Correct? Now, what is this room?
This, we really don't know what they had it as, but the docents just decided that since the grand piano was donated and moved in here, but the organ is actually older than the house.
People outside felt that this should be a music room, it sounds like,
Yes.
and maybe it was in the time, and we don't know, but at least for now it is. Now we also have one more room downstairs to visit before we go upstairs. So now we're in the bedroom, the only bedroom downstairs, and Pat, you have a story here you want to share with
Yes,
me.
this is the bed that Chung, the grandson of the people that built the house, this was the only house he ever lived in. He was born in this bed, actually born in this bed, and this is the bed he was in when they moved him to the hospital just before he passed away. So he has lived his whole life in this house. And above the bed is a portrait. It's a self-portrait.
As far as his family life?
He had a Patty. He and his first wife, Gertrude, divorced. And she took the daughter and went to Arizona.
We have seen the entire downstairs. You have given us so much information. I just want to thank you for this lovely tour of the downstairs part of the home before we go upstairs.
We're glad to have you, and I really enjoy doing this.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to head upstairs and we're going to see what's yet to be discovered up there, where I know there's quite a few more surprises. So we made our way upstairs, and now we're in one of 3 bedrooms up here, which are considered bedrooms, but it's actually a sewing room. And we have Marie Carter, who's our docent for the upstairs, to show us around and tell us some more about this. Marie, can you tell me about the sewing room?
I think this probably was a nursery in the beginning, but maybe after Mr. Hargitt grew up, they made it into a sewing room. And we have here old Singer treadle machine, and where you used your foot to pedal it and everything. And then this piece of furniture, equipment here, you took this out and heated it, and then you would put fabric in there and turn the handle, and that would pleat it.
So it was like a crimper in a way.
Okay. That's what it would crimp. And this is just an example of the kind of clothes the babies wore then. One of the things I like to remember about some of these clothes is all of the boy babies wore dresses until they were potty trained. then they could wear pants. So this possibly could have been, since it was a boy child and the girls before, possibly could have been their clothes. And just there's some old patterns here. Flat iron. You heat it on the stove or in front of the fireplace and did your ironing. And here is part of a spinning wheel. I'm not sure that they ever actually did that, or if it's just a piece of equipment from that era.
We also, over here, we have a whole hat collection, and this one is my personal favorite, but it's one of these that stand out more than the others, I guess you could say. Is this something reminiscent of the time that they may have worn? Is that why we have that here?
It's possibly. I think they went in a lot for flowers, a lot of ornate hats, if you remember movies from that time. So that probably was similar to what they wore then.
So now we're in bedroom 1 of the 2 bedrooms upstairs. There's also an apartment we're going to get to in just a moment. But this bedroom is a large size bedroom for back in the day, and it has some really interesting features here. If you can tell us about those, Marie.
All right, we have here a wash basin and a pitcher. They did not have running water in the house, especially upstairs. And you would get out of bed in the morning, pour water in the bowl, wash your hands, dry it with the little towels in the back, and then pour the excess water in the chamber pot, which they would use at night instead of going outside to the outhouse.
In addition to the wash basin, there's something here that I bet a lot of people have never seen before. What is that?
It's called a foot warmer. And they would fill it full of hot water, put it under the sheets and the blankets in wintertime to keep their feet warm.
I understand there's also quite a few windows here. There's 4 windows. That's a lot of light and a lot of sun that probably help them keep warm. Is that right?
Yeah, I think both ways. They didn't have electricity back then, so they used lamps or candles, like you have a lamp here behind you. And so more windows was more light. And even in the wintertime, more windows, if the sun is shining, gives heat to the room.
And there's another window-looking feature up there.
They're called transoms, and what they did, they could close the bedroom doors for privacy, but open those transoms and get the air circulating through the other windows and doors in the house.
The second bedroom here, it's a little smaller than the first bedroom we just saw, but it's still very spacious, especially for back then. And there's also a nice bay window, and it has a lot of intricate woodwork that I understand was hand done back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
That's
correct?
right. That's correct.
Now here is a vanity, what we would have found back with maybe Cora or some of her gloves and other jewelry, and we have glasses as well.
Yes, here would be a glove box. That's kind of self-explanatory. It is full of gloves, as you can see, and that's where they would have stored their gloves. They did wear gloves anytime they went out.
And these gloves, to me, they are so small. They look like children's gloves, but you were telling me that they're not. These are what the women would wear.
Women's gloves.
They're very, very small back then, so they had very petite hands at the time. So now also the bay window here to me is a really beautiful setting. They can overlook their land. They have crops that they were growing at the time. They can just have a nice view there. It's a little different today, but back then it must have been really a nice place to sit.
I would think so. We'll look over the crops and see how they're growing, and then no neighbors. They couldn't spy on the neighbors. So, but I like the window and the chair as a spot where you could relax and read.
So now we're standing in front of what is the bathroom, but this hasn't been with the house, obviously, since day one. This was built a lot more recently.
Yes, but I'm not sure of what year, but it was added, I'm sure, after they got running water, city water, so they could have a bathroom. But the tub is called a clawfoot tub, and it's large, and the back is slanted, which makes it great on a summer day for cooling and relaxing in a bath. And then the tank where they flush the commode is up high on the wall, which is a handle you pull down. I'm sure that would be convenient to stop the kids from overflushing.
And there's also a medicine cabinet, and I noticed that from back in the day, there's some boxes and potions and bottles in there that we can find too.
Also, on the stool in the bathroom are some magazines that were published in 1922.
Oh, those are interesting reads, I bet. Yeah. Now we find ourselves in the apartment. It was Cora and her husband Charles's apartment. At the time when they got married, Dee Dee Johnston had this built for them. So they had their own private suite of sorts. Right. And so can you tell me a few things in this apartment that we'll find here?
Well, most of what is in this case and on the wall was from Chung. And he was a good athlete, I understand, played baseball, and was a good catcher. And we have pictures here of him and his team. And up here is one of him and then his dad in the football autographed. I'm not sure that was his or if it was a donation. But I am impressed with his diploma, high school diploma from 1912. And the other thing I find interesting is his Letterman sweater here with the big E for Excelsior.
So what I also find that's interesting is you mentioned he was an academic, and he went on later in life and he was a teacher.
Right.
But while he was a teacher, he continued running this ranch as it should be. He was the one that did the books and made sure everything was still working as it running properly.
Yeah, he did have a farm manager that I'm sure took care of the outside work. And there is a lady who lives in Norwalk that comes occasionally who grew up on this farm.
Marie, one of the things that really got my attention here is the picture of Chun, and it says Patsy Hargitt. Can you tell me more about this photograph that we're seeing here?
Well, I think this was in his later years, probably in 60s or something like that. He does look like an older gentleman. And that's probably about the last picture that was made of him that I'm aware of.
So that photograph and all these photographs we've seen around the home, it really shows you 3 generations were living here. They were raised here. He was literally born here, and he lived his entire life here.
Right.
And he lived his life overlooking land and continuing basically what his grandfather started.
Mm-hmm. He did, and still ran the farm. And it's just an interesting story, the whole thing about the Hargitts and Johnsons.
And they were the pioneer families of Norwalk.
Right.
So now, after taking a look at the entire upstairs part of the home, it looks like our tour is come to an end, unfortunately. But thanks to Marie for showing us the upstairs and teaching us more about the different rooms and all the things that were used back then. It was very interesting, and I appreciate that. That was really nice.
Thank you, and it was my pleasure to do this.
Now we come full circle. We see this farm truck from 1929, which encapsulates a family's history. When D.D. Johnson and his family moved here, horse and buggy was the mode of transportation. Then cars were invented. We can only imagine what the family has seen in their years here in Norwalk and in the world. If you'd like to learn more about the Hargitt House Museum, or even better, become a docent, they'd love to hear from you. For your Norwalk Highlight in History, I'm Jacqueline Twegg.